Okay, so it's with great pleasure. I'm speaking today with Bjørn, who is going to introduce himself in a second, but it's a very dear topic to my heart. It's around mental health, and especially in the corporate situations and corporate environment. But first, Bjørn, would you be kind enough to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you actually are?
Yeah, sure thing. I'm happy. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this conversation, as well as for you. Corporate mental health is a theme that I work with day in and day out. So I'm glad that I can get the chance to speak on this. But this is what we do. I have a consultancy company where we work with corporate mental health with two objectives: to increase the mental resource that the employees have while they're at work, and increase their ability to relax when they get home from work. So this is kind of the aim of what we do. So that's kind of the short introduction to me. I'm happy to give a thorough one if that's what you like, but the show is yours, so to speak.
So what does your typical day look like then in terms of your day-to-day work? Are you mostly running workshops, or how does it look?
Yeah, so I think you can put it into three different categories. So one is a workshop or coaching, the other one is software development, and the third one is sales. So that is what I do.
Okay, awesome. And so tell us a little bit about what you're seeing as the main trends in regards to mental health in the corporate environment.
I'm actually not sure there is a trend just yet. I think that it's still so new that it's too early to actually talk about there being a trend. Although I think that on a global scale, maybe there's becoming more interest on having focused on stress in general and looking into what can we actually do to reduce the number of people who suffer from stress. I think that's the only trend that's actually there, because it's still too soon to say that you can actually see that there is a movement where CEOs and HR people are starting to involve themselves with mental health in the workplace.
Okay, and so what about things like depression and so on? Are you sort of able to deal with that, or are you mostly looking at stress as a main issue?
Yeah, and that's the thing. So I usually put it into this, and these are numbers coming out of kind of stats from Denmark. So if you look at the population in Denmark, 13% of the working force suffers from a mental illness, which could be depression, anxiety, or suicidal thoughts, or other types of mental illness. Of the rest of the population, of the working population, 50% can within the last 3 months report that they have had the feeling of being stressed. And I think what's quite interesting, or at least how I see it, is that if you're mentally ill, then you need help from a clinical person or someone who's trained within this. And we don't support any of that kind of training. We don't have the education for that, although all the stuff that we do are scientifically proven. But we want to focus on kind of the rest of the employees, and actually making sure that no one is coming into the phase where they're actually feeling stressed. And what I think that's quite important, and this is kind of one of the most important topics for me, is that we need to kind of get away from the sense where we are talking about stress and starting to put up education on how not to get stressed. I think that it's more important to talk about how I can actually become mentally healthy, because right now a lot of people are mentally unhealthy. And it's the same if you look into kind of our everyday life. Most people know if you go to eat fast food for 7 days in a row, then you're unhealthy. But right now, no one is recognizing that if you're too much on social media, if you're answering too many emails too fast, well, then you're mentally unhealthy, and it can have some consequences over time. So we really need to take this into consideration, that there are not just two categories, which is either you're mentally ill or you're something else mentally. I think we need to encourage that we should talk about mentally illness, but we should also talk about if you're mentally healthy or mentally unhealthy or have a poor mental health.
Okay, that's very cool, because there is always gradations, and someone who was perfectly fine, let's say, can become extremely stressed potentially over quite a short period of time, and that needs to be addressed and seen and so on. So how do you actually go about identifying who is stressed, and how does your solution actually help to deal with that?
And that's the thing. So the aim for us is not to identify if someone is stressed. It's more to go in and look upon what kind of situation is the people that we're working with in at the given moment. Maybe they're stressed, maybe they're not, maybe they're fine, and then we want to move them forward with using different techniques on mental performance. I think it's quite important to state that for us to be a success, we need to increase the productivity of the company using mental health as a tool for doing that. And that's why I think it's important that we move away from the kind of the thoughts where we should all try not to get stressed, and then start to focus on we should all try to become more aware of our own mental health, so that we won't get into the situation where we actually in an overload. Because it is the corporate world, and from time to time, most people with ambitions will experience that they're working too much and too hard. But and we kind of need to recognize this, and we need to recognize the signs. So when is it that I actually need to do something? So I see it more of as an education for people to get a better understanding of themselves, because we live in a quite practically, we live in a society right now where if we are not really selective about our own attention, someone is going to steal it away from us. So if we just let it pass, and this is not only bad for the individual, but it's also bad for the individual's family, and it's bad for their productivity at work. And this just goes in a bad spiral where you're not satisfied with the work that you're delivering, and then you go home, you won't get the rest that you need to actually have the energy to deliver at work the next day. And then it's all going to be a bad spiral. And then one of the cases could be what you're mentioning, that people will suffer from stress from a short period of time. And I think that we need to be better at this by setting up some quite simple rules, as I see it, for the individuals.
Yeah, totally. And this is where the notion of drawing the boundary between work life and personal life is very hard to do, because certainly all of us, I'm sure, have experienced times when we've gone to work stressed, and you can't just sort of switch off, because humans are not robots in that sense. So what are some of the kind of best practices that you bring into corporate? Because the way I came across you and your company is through the 5 secrets document that you kindly shared for free on your website, which we'll link to in this video for others to download. But can tell us maybe like one of those secrets or 2 of those secrets.
Yeah, sure. But if it's all right with you, I would like to approach it in a slightly different way, if that's okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so it's very individual what kind of organizations that you're working with, because one of the things that we really need to put into a modern organization is working with interruptions. And interruptions can be all sorts of things. So it can be everything from a notification to a colleague who has a bad habit of standing up and interrupting everyone. So a typical clash can between a logistic department and a sales department. So if they're placed really close to each other and the salespeople have a bad habit of standing up every time they're speaking in their phones and maybe walking around, and then they're actually interrupting everyone. And this is something that goes both ways, because we need to have more respect of each other's presence and our each other's focus when we are actually solving a task. So that's one of the kind of the key issues, is to work with interruptions. But we also need to take into consideration what kind of job is it that I'm actually doing? Because if you're in a support function and you want to focus on interruptions, well, in a support function, it's kind of your job to get interrupted by the customers who is approaching you either via chat or via the phone. So you kind of need to look into, so what's actually going on in the specific organization that you're working with. So that's kind of one of the things. And as a thing that comes on top of this is that we need to be better at actually giving ourselves space to focus. So just giving ourselves, imagine just having one task that you would actually do within 2 hours. I think that's extremely important, that then for those 2 hours, you let yourself be focused and actually shut off your Slack, your email, or whatever notification that could be interrupting you, because that is just truly important, and it will increase the well-being in so many ways, because most likely you will finalize the job, so you're getting a satisfaction for actually completing something. That's one thing. You will also not interrupt anyone when you're actually focusing. And the third part is that you will, the productivity will go up, because you actually have the ability to stay focused and actually dive down to the material that you're working with.
So to what extent is the kind of open plan office responsible, in your experience, to these kind of levels of stress and so on? And to what extent do you see perhaps that changing with respect to this?
I actually don't see it changing, because the expense of having an open office space is so much lower than having an office where everybody gets their own booth. But what I think, and actually what you're seeing right now as a more or less a global trend, is where you're getting these phone booths where people can go in and shut the door, and then they can stay focused for there or speak on the phone, so that they're not interrupting anyone. I think that kind of this is where the trend is going, that we're getting more and more spaces where we can actually put ourselves somewhere. And this is also one of our key aspects, is that it's not everyone's fault that you're getting interrupted. Most likely, most of the interruptions is on you. So you can just start by doing shutting off whatever notifications that you have, and then maybe moving yourself away from the open landscape if you actually have to focus for a couple of hours. If that's not a possibility, well, there are a lot of, like on the really low practical level, you can just print out a paper that's red and put it up whenever you want to focus. And then again, it's important that you start communicating and actually teaching your environment that you don't want to be interrupted when you have the red flag or whatever signal that you want to put up. So if a colleague actually comes to interrupt you while you're focusing, and you have communicated to your environment that you want to stay focused, well, then you need to explain them. So thank you for your approach. I'm happy to give you the answer, but just so you know, that when this flag is up, or when I have this red sheet on my paper, I actually would like to have time to focus on the task that I have at hand.
So how does that work then with because in 2002, in my master's degree in business management, my final degree thesis was managing virtual teams in completely virtual environments. How does that work for virtual companies then?
Okay, that's, So the company that I'm working with right now is a very modern Danish startup. They are doing really great, and they were actually taken over by a hedge fund last year. So it's a really success story. And most of the team, as you say, are managed online. Actually, sometimes they forget that they are actually at the office and they can just talk to each other, because it's a habit just to write to each other on whatever communication platforms they're using. So I don't see it as changing, because regardless of you're being on a virtual team or you're at a physical team, it's the same task for you. You still need to kind of give yourself the space to actually solve the task that you have at hand. Does it make sense?
Yes, yes.
So regardless of where you're at, you still need to kind of say, okay, so from 8 to 10, I'm actually focusing on this task.
Okay, so there is then probably a great element of effectively encoding or designing these relaxation features into collaboration tools to enable people to relax and focus as a kind of systemic user experience design best practice approach. Would you agree with that?
I think
that's
I would love for
that's a
you
super
to
leading question for me. Like,
yes,
let me rephrase that. Yeah.
No, but it's a great. I would love to actually ask you back. So, can you give a concrete example of something that has been built in that's creating relaxation for the employees?
Yeah, there is examples would be there are Chrome extensions tools, right, that enable users to set up times at which they can even like access any internet whatsoever, let alone social media, for example. So and so let's say they can set up to be able to access social media from 12 till 12:30 and 3 till 4. Okay. And that's when the Chrome extension will let them through. Otherwise it plays calming meditative sounds.
Okay. Okay. It's the I've of course heard previously about people actually doesn't have the ability to go on social media on their workplace. What is not working when it comes to that is that most people actually have social media on their phone, and if they have a working phone, they probably also have a private phone, and it can be quite hard to control. And one of the things that we have experienced when we first started working with corporate mental health is that regardless of it being a theme that we want to increase the corporate mental health, people have been so used to actually getting contents that's personalized for them. So this we also need to think into our process. So what we have done is that we work with 4 different themes. So energy, focus, balance, or performance. And this is so that you can actually design the process that you're in when on an individual basis, when you're using our mobile application, when we start to increase your mental health. So that's one thing that's on the learning space, but also on the training side, because we do cognitive training, we do breathing, we do meditation, we do relaxation exercises. But what is extremely important is that we get the motivation from within the individual. So we kind of need to put up the objective. So what is motivating for you to do? So do you want to do cognitive training, or do you want to do meditation? And most likely people won't enjoy doing both. So the people who actually, a lot of people actually get stressed by trying to do mindfulness, most
Yes.
probably because they're doing it
Meditation
wrong.
itself is stressful. Yeah.
Yeah, it can be for some people if they're not getting taught it in the right way. So I think that we need to respect that we are different as individuals, and we kind of need to educate people on what kind of different methodologies there are for getting to the goal. So we don't do the same thing at the gym either. The same thing. So some people like to run, other people like to lift weights. And it's exactly the same things when it comes to our own mental health. We need to look into and be curious on what's actually working for me right now at this given stage. And this opportunity we need to deliver to people from the corporate side, not only because we think it's great that people learn to meditate, but simply from a productivity point of view, so to speak, that we need to most of the people that go to work every day, and probably most of the people who are listening to your channel, lives of generating the thoughts that comes out of their head. They're
Totally.
not, yeah,
Knowledge workers. Yeah.
exactly. They're not digging holes anymore. So they're actually, in old days, there was a lot of focus on back issues. Now we need to have a lot of focus on how you're actually using your brain, and also how can you use it to your advantage, especially when it comes to being creative. So can we actually put up some breaks throughout the day? We call it constructive pausing. And this is also one of the things that actually increase the ability to solve a problem and be more creative, so to speak.
So, okay, conscious of time, I want to slowly start wrapping up, but how do you then typically deal with those differences in needs? You don't then have, you know, sledgehammer solution for this. What does your kind of quote unquote prescription look like then? Let's say if I was running a 1,000 people corporation, I said, let's just deal with all of them, right? How would you approach that then?
So the way that we approach this is that we need to educate. We see it as blended learning. So we want to meet people face to face, but we also want them to have some activity. And I know that it's a contradiction that we want people to increase their mental health by using their phones. But I think that it's a given that we're not going to get people to actually put away their phones for the rest of their lives. So we just need to recognize that we also need to fix the problem there. And then if you move from a workshop point of view, where we have given people some introductions to what is actually mental health and when are you actually mentally unhealthy, from there people need to get presented with different choices. And this is where we use our application, where people actually continuously have the ability to change the way that they're training their mental health. And then some of the stuff that I mentioned earlier, either you can work with cognitive training, constructive pauses, mindfulness exercises, or breathing exercises. And then we actually squeeze it all together so that we use the new knowledge that people are getting and the training results, kind of the new knowledge on how my brain is working. And then we transfer this into behavior, which is moving the organizations in a proactive direction.
Okay, so it's a very quite a scientific and a structured process. That how long does this take? For example, if you start working with a corporation, when do you know you're finished?
Yeah, well, when it comes to our mental health, we probably never finish, but a typical process is 3 to 4 months, where we have where we have 3 to 4 online activities where we like that people engage each day for 5 minutes or so.
Okay. Cool. So where can people find more about your company and what you do?
They can do that on, it's called WeFocus.dk.
And how long have you been doing this now?
So we have been doing it for several years. It started out actually as a tool that I needed for myself, because I had a search company where I was searching candidates for other recruitment firms, and I wanted to be able to focus for a longer period of time. So this was kind of where my interest moved into the cognitive training. And on our webpage, the way that we want to broad out kind of the work and the focus on corporate mental health is that we offer a certification for other consultants and HR people. And you can check more of that out on our webpage.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, I'll definitely be checking that out, and probably there'll be a bunch of people who will be interested in that. So Bjørn, thank you so much for this conversation. I really appreciate you, and you're doing very important work on de-stressing and helping people to actually live a much healthier life, which we're all about, supporting and putting those kind of messages out. So thank you very much. I really appreciate you, and all the best in your work. And, hopefully you'll get more people inquiring about your consultancy through our channel. And, welcome to the community in the virtual space. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for
All the
having
best.
me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day. Bye.